Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Startup Talks. Today we're doing another special. We're covering ICP, or Ideal Customer Profile. Who exactly are you selling to? We'll go through 5 subtopics: the number one targeting mistake, why generic messaging kills sales, a 3-question framework that goes from demographic to psychographic, why giving your persona a name matters, and why small businesses in Germany is not a strategy. Let's go. Let's start with something I see constantly. Founders who've relocated, say from India to Germany, lose their intuitive sense of the market. They grew up knowing their customers back home. Here, that context is gone, and the brain finds a workaround. I'll sell to everyone who pays. It feels like the safe move, but it's not a strategy. It's the absence of one.
And it's not just immigrants, this is across the board. The advertising algorithms on Facebook and Google have been hyper-specialized for at least a decade. You actually get a performance boost when you're extremely specific about who your offer is for. The more precisely you name your audience in a creative, the better the algorithm pushes it.
Right. And this problem hits founders from corporate backgrounds especially hard: consulting, finance, IT. They spent years building great products, but someone else always decided who the customer was. When they go solo, they've never had to make that call themselves.
So broad targeting isn't really openness, it's indecision disguised as a strategy.
Exactly. And here's the thing: narrowing your audience doesn't shrink your market. It increases your conversion rate inside the niche you're actually targeting. One specific type of client, one specific pain, one specific message. That's not a constraint. That's how you win.
The practical move I've seen work. Have 5 to 10 conversations with people you think are your customers. Then look at which conversation came closest to a purchase. What did those people have in common? Company size, stage, language, the pain they were feeling. That's your starting point.
It's simple in theory and almost nobody does it. They'd rather guess than go talk to people. Here's a scenario most founders recognize. You announce your product on social media. You tell your network. You get polite responses. Interesting, sounds good. And then nothing. No sales. And the product is actually good.
The product isn't the problem, the message is. When someone hears a generic pitch, they think, this is probably not for me, and they move on even if it was exactly for them.
So the fix is to get specific. Instead of broadcasting to everyone, tell a story: a past client, a concrete situation, a specific result. When the right person hears that story, they start mapping it onto their own life. And that's the moment where the connection happens.
I'd put it this way. There are no bad offers, only offers made to the wrong people. A Ferrari is a perfect offer for someone who just made their first real money at 30. The same offer to a 20-year-old just starting out or to someone who already has 3 Ferraris lands completely differently.
So the whole psychographic state of the buyer matters. Their past experience, their worldview, where they are in their journey. To predict whether someone will buy, you have to simulate their cognitive path from where they are now to where they want to be.
And that's why personal stories work. They're a mechanism for transferring experience. You give the listener a character they can identify with, a conflict, a resolution. They experience it, not just hear it. Their mental state shifts.
And here's the layered part. When you tell a personal story about a specific client, that story has your ideal customer profile embedded in it. When the right person tries on the story, they're also trying on the persona. That's why it works as a targeting tool, not just a content format.
One more thing to clarify. Ideal customer doesn't mean a perfect person. It means the person who's an ideal fit for your business. They have a problem. That's what makes them your ideal customer. But without the problem, they have no reason to buy.
So, let's talk about ICP properly. Every business needs to define it before anything else, not as a best practice, but as a prerequisite. You can't build a lead gen strategy without it. You can't pick channels. You can't write copy. You have nothing.
Most founders describe their customer demographically. Small companies, 10 to 50 people, B2B SaaS, and that description tells you almost nothing about why that person should buy.
Exactly. What I want to do instead is move from demographic to psychographic. And I've got 3 questions that do that shift.
Let's hear them.
First question. What does this person Google at 3 in the morning? Not the polished version they tell you at a networking event, the raw, unfiltered thing that's keeping them awake. That's the real pain.
And the social version is almost always different from the real version. People present a curated version of their problems when they are being observed. The 3 aim search is honest.
Second question. What have they already tried to solve this? If they've actually done something, hired someone, bought a tool, changed a process that tells you the pain is big enough to act on, they're aware the problem exists and they're willing to spend to fix it.
It's also a signal of market awareness. They've seen what's out there, they know the landscape. That's a much more ready buyer than someone who's never thought about it.
Third question. Why didn't those previous attempts work? This one is the most powerful. The answer gives you the exact language to use with this customer. If you can reframe your offer around why everything else failed and why yours is different, that's often the last step that closes the sale.
I had a case that illustrated this perfectly. A business owner came to me saying his problem was filtering credit-worthy clients. But as we talked, it became clear the real problem was much more basic. He had never defined who he wanted to work with at all. He didn't have an ICP. And without that, he had no idea where to look for the right clients.
That's the thing. ICP directly determines your sourcing channels. You can't find the right people if you don't know who you're looking for.
And there are tools now that can help you test this without having those real conversations first. Synthetic users, Deepson, they let you build AI personas and run your messaging against them. The avatars respond honestly without social performance. It's a good way to pressure test your ICP before you go to market.
Not a replacement for real conversations, but a useful accelerator. Once you've done the psychographic work, there's one more step that most people skip. Give the persona an actual name and a specific age.
Not a range, a number.
Exactly. Not tech founders in Berlin, 25 to 40, but Andreas, 42 years old, left Deloitte in 2004, was a manager, launched a SaaS startup, has no idea how to generate leads.
When I write a post for that person specifically, it works. When I write it for a segment, it doesn't land for anyone.
That's the shift from segment to persona. A segment is a category. You can't write a post for a category. You can't record a video that resonates with a category. But you can write for Andreas.
And giving him a name forces you to think at a personal level. You start imagining his morning routine, what he's stressed about, what he talks about with his co-founder. You access a different layer of insight.
The persona doesn't have to be a real person. We invented all of it. But the specificity is real, and that's what makes it useful. Andreas at 42.5 is someone you can write to. B2B founder 25 to 40 is not. There's a version of this problem that's very specific to B2B startups. We serve small businesses. That sounds like a category, but it's not.
A small business can be a kebab shop and a fintech with average contract sizes of 50,000 euros, where the buying decision involves a whole committee. Same label, completely different reality.
Different pains, different budgets, different content channels, different internal languages. You cannot build one landing page that speaks to both. You cannot make one sales video that converts both. You always have to choose.
And the reflex to stay broad comes from fear. If I narrow it, what if I lose the others? But the math works the other way. Sharper message, higher conversion in the niche you pick.
Pick one, do it well, then expand. That's the path, not serve everyone from day one. All right, let's make this concrete. Let's take a real startup and work through the 3 questions live.
I've got one I'm working on. It transcribes YouTube videos, extracts the key claims, stores them in a vector and graph database, and then when a new video comes out, it compares it against what the user already knows and returns a 2 to 3 minute personalized summary with only the new information. New.
I like it. So the product came from your own frustration.
Completely. I had hundreds of browser tabs open. YouTube videos I knew I'd never get to. I kept adding to the backlog and the pile just kept growing. I knew there were new things happening in AI every week and I was already behind.
Okay, first question. What were you Googling at 3 in the morning? What was actually keeping you up?
On the surface, it was, how do I organize all this information? But the deeper thing was FOMO. I was scared of missing something important in the space and falling behind. I just didn't frame it that way to myself.
Right. You presented the symptom, not the root cause. You thought you had a time management problem, but it was an anxiety problem about professional relevance.
Exactly. And that distinction matters because the messaging has to hit the emotional layer, not just the functional one.
Second question. What had you already tried?
Notion pages with categorized links, browser bookmarks, dedicated time blocks for watching, and then Notebook LEM. I tried collecting 10 to 15 sources, asking it questions, generating summaries. It sort of worked, but it was too heavy. You had to do a lot of setup to get anything out.
And what was the core failure of all those attempts?
None of them eliminated the need to actually watch the videos. I still had to sit there and decide what was new and what I already knew. The cataloging just moved the problem from one place to another, and Notebook LM made it worse in a way. It turned passive backlog into active to-dos, which multiplied the pressure.
So the pain isn't, I can't find my videos. It's, I'm spending time managing a system that doesn't actually do the work. And underneath that, I might be missing something that makes me irrelevant.
That's it.
Let's build the persona. If we name this person, let's call him Tim. Tim is probably around 35, works in IT or tech-adjacent roles, and his professional identity is tied to being the person who knows what's happening. He sees staying current as a competitive advantage. Maybe his last serious career lever.
That resonates. The FOMO has a cause. It's not just curiosity, it's that knowing more than the next person in the room feels like the edge he has left.
And he's tried everything. Notion, bookmarks, time blocking, Notebook LM. Nothing worked because none of it extracted knowledge automatically. It all required him to do the cognitive work himself.
Which is exactly the thing he doesn't have time or energy for.
So now you know what to say. Tired of saving things to Notion that you'll never read? Forget Notion. You know where he is, what he's tried, why it failed, and what he's actually afraid of. The messaging writes itself.
It does. Once the ICP is real, concrete, named, with a backstory, everything else clicks into place.
That's the whole point. ICP isn't a box you tick on a strategy doc. It's the thing that makes every other decision obvious, what to say, where to say it, and how to position your offer. Once it's clear, you're not guessing anymore. That's all for today. Thanks for listening and see you in the next episode of Startup Talks.